Hi everybody, my name is Abigail Skarosky, and this is my nonfiction book review. The nonfiction book we'll be reviewing today is Weird Wisconsin. This book actually has 4 authors. That's right, 4. The first 2 are named Linda Joffrey and Richard D. Hendricks, and they're both Wisconsin natives and definitely did the most work on the book itself. They did all the research, the writing. However, this book is part of a series called Weird US, where it tries to collect all of the folklores of the nation in general, and then they realized there were just too many, so they broke it down by state. And considering I am a Wisconsin native, I decided to do this book because these are a lot of the places I grew up around. And so overseeing this whole book series would be Mark Moen and Mark Caesarman. And so Mark Moen is actually a graphic designer and did a lot of the graphics in the book. So when you look, you got some stuff that's just photographs with the way it's paged and the font. And some of them, if you're lucky, will have the double picture. So it's kind of fun that way. As I previously mentioned, this book is all about capturing the oddities of Wisconsin. And this can range from a Cadillac stuck in a tree to a haunted Kmart, because apparently that's a thing in my state. I can tell you that reading this book has definitely shown me a whole different side of Wisconsin. I grew up learning the baseball side and the farming and, walking down to my dad's office every day. But what I didn't know, and that this book taught me, is literally 1 block down from my dad's office was this corporate headquarters of a security company, and apparently on their property they have a haunted pond where a little boy fell in and drowned back in 1980. And it's just really interesting to hear all of these different perspectives of a place that I grew up in called home. And that's one of the things I really respect about this book series, The Weird US, because it documents the paranormal. And so I would definitely classify it as the interpretive nonfiction. However, it almost leads you to question, is it inquisitive? Because it does lead you to ask questions about, is this real? Is this fake? How do you distinguish fact from fiction? But apart from this book just being about fact and fiction, it also captures just the oddities of Wisconsin. For example, there's a top museum, like a spinning top museum in Burlington, which is just completely random and something apparently is a Wisconsin thing. But I respect that when they went about researching this, they did hire 2 Wisconsin native writers, Linda Joffrey and Richard D. Hendricks. And Richard D. Hendricks has actually been studying the paranormal in Wisconsin since 1998, which was right around the time I was born. So I can't imagine finding any writer more qualified to write a book entitled Weird Wisconsin. It seems as though it's really accurate. This book does have a bibliography, index, everything that helps me validate their sources. And another thing that's really interesting is they do have a lot of first-hand sources. They go to eyewitnesses. There's a story about a bloody bride who supposedly was murdered on the night of her wedding on this bridge in Stevens Point. And they went and found the police officer who apparently had her show up in the back of his car. And so I really respect the fact that they dive in and take the time to go find those eyewitnesses. And it seems as though the narrative, it's definitely a combination between the narrative and the expository style, because it does tell a story, it is capturing that folklore. But at the same time, there are other parts of the book that explain that apparently Wisconsin is home to the nation's largest urinal. I didn't know that. I still wouldn't know that unless I read it in this book. So that kind of thing is definitely more expository, where when they tell stories about the bloody bride, that's going to be a lot more narrative because it's from perspective, or there's stories that people have lived. I also think it's really interesting that the organization style is a lot more descriptive, because you're describing these stories and embedding this culture of a state and showing how it differs from this specific state from that of those around it. I appreciate that it is so descriptive and so almost folkloric that it gets to capture all of these legends, and I really enjoyed reading this book. As far as organizational tools go, this book covers a wide variety of topics, and so it's sorted into categories such as the paranormal and then roadside oddities and stuff like that. So I enjoy that they do have a table of contents, they do have a bibliography, they do have an index, which they actually have 2 indexes, which I found interesting. They have one that's all of the titles and the stories that you're looking for. There's another one that's sorted by city. So for someone like me who grew up in Appleton, I can look and say, Appleton, what do they have? And that's how I found out about that pond by my dad's work. And then I can say hey, I'm going down to Stevens Point, what can I look up? Then I find stories about like The Bloody Bride that I wouldn't be able to look up in the traditional index because it's entitled Bloody Bride, not Stevens Point Ghost. Because apparently there are a couple ghosts in Stevens Point. Maybe I want to stay away from that area. Now we get to have my favorite part, which is the graphics and the illustrations and the pictures. I feel as though this book does a really, really good job of bringing in different colors and pictures to capture your reader's attention. One of the wonderful parts of being in a book series is one of the writers that initiates this and like kind of oversees it, Mark Caesarman and Mark Moran, are both graphic designers, and so they're really intentional about creating great quality illustrations in these books. So I'll show you right here at the beginning of the book, they're talking about a headless nun up in Burlington, and you can see they added the drawing there because obviously, like, you can't photograph a ghost. Everyone knows that. So they drew it in to help the reader envision this imagination. But they also do things like this, where they will fill pages with pictures and fit the text around the pictures. But then every caption is in a different font, in a different color, to help it stand out and really capture your reader's attention. And I think something excellent about the text is it is really PG. When I read this, I remember the first time I heard about this book, I was probably about 11 years old, and walked down to Barnes & Noble and just started thumbing through the pages and didn't intensely read it. But nothing about the text frightened me at the age of 11. And so I'd recommend that this book is probably for age 11 to 10 and up. I mean, I, as a 20-year-old adult, really enjoyed reading it and learning more about my hometown where I grew up. Another thing that the text does really well is it describes the pictures. It's not as though there are pictures and then there is text. The text is definitely bringing attention to the pictures and including the reader by using more than just your visual sense. You see, like, you're seeing the pictures, but then you're hearing like the gusts of wind in the background as the Bloody Bride appears in the back of the officer's car, and it's almost as if you can hear it. Like, the text is so descriptive at times, but then when it is just narrative and you are telling that story, you just feel so immersed in it. I really enjoyed reading this. As far as recommending this book, I definitely would not recommend it to the faint of heart. Anyone who's super nervous or worried about the paranormal activity, this might not be the book for you. However, I would definitely recommend this to a lot of Wisconsin residents. Growing up in Wisconsin and being able to read this book about my hometown really creates that fire and that passion, and you learn about the most random things, like a colony of midgets that's supposedly protected by an older man that like a full-size man that defends all the midgets. Like, that's just kind of weird random things, and when you are living in Wisconsin, you have the ability to say like, hey, that's 2 hours down the road, let's go drive. And so it's literature like this, especially nonfiction literature, that families can get into and they can all dive and use it to document their trips or almost guide it, like, hey, like, we're going here for a wedding, what's around it that we can see? And so a book like this has phenomenal opportunities and potential to bring families together or friends, and I would definitely recommend this to anyone living in Wisconsin. And feel as though if you were to read it outside of Wisconsin, if you've never been, I think it's alright, but it doesn't capture your attention. It doesn't hold you there because you've never been there, you've never seen that. For example, they do have a weird Texas, and as I've moved to Texas, I think I have to hunt down this book. So thank you so much for your time, and I appreciate you listening to my presentation. Thank you.